Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness. And Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we are talking about setting goals. Very important if we want to achieve things. So, Donovan, what are your initial thoughts when it comes to setting goals?
I think there are a couple larger topics to take apart in this, which is basically there's one around like how do you set goals?
Right.
There's one around how do you implement them, right? Because a lot of people set their goals and then struggle to actually make consistent progress on them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's another theme around sort of why goals are useful or valuable, because I feel like there's some number of people who for whatever reason are just like, I don't want to set goals. It's too much hassle and it's not worth the effort. So those I think are probably the three main parts, but I'd be curious what your sort of initial thoughts are.
Yeah, I think when it comes to setting goals, there are like different types, and it's like there's like the big lofty goals, which you don't even know how you're going to achieve. And then could be smaller ones, like day by day goals. Like right now, I'm just trying to eat healthy every day, meditate, and just get my regular habits in check, which are just tiny goals. And in the grand scheme of things, they don't seem so hard. But when it's like those bigger goals, I'm like, how am I going to do that? so those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think you touched on something really important, which is goals can sort of be set at various levels, right? Which is to say, like, I can have a goal to be like financially independent, right? I can have that goal. But by itself, that goal doesn't really tell me like what I should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So in my experience, or like the way that I like to look at it is whenever I have a goal like that, where it's like, cool, this is a thing, right? Like I know that financial independence is like, it means something,
right,
but it doesn't tell me like what actions to take. I need to further break it down. So like one piece for that goal, for example, is like, okay, but what does financially independent actually mean? Like, what's the target? Because it could mean like, oh, I can pay all my expenses for, each year. So like I make that much money on my projects or whatever. Or it could mean I can literally buy whatever I want, right? Like I can live a lifestyle completely different than the one I have. And it's a crazy, like expensive and whatever else, or it can mean a bunch of other things. So one piece, at least for me, is when I have bigger goals like that, just getting more and more concrete, right? Because then once I move from that position of like, okay, become financially independent, okay, make 60K a year, okay, then from there, like I can keep making subdividing the goals until I find something that's like, oh, okay, make a course every single month, right? And once I get down to that level, I actually have an idea of what it is I need to do. But I feel like that's where I've seen a lot of people get stuck, and that's where I have gotten stuck in the past. So it's just like, well, I have this lofty goal, and then fast forward 5 years, and it's like I'm not making any progress on my goal, and it's like, well, that's because I didn't get specific enough to figure out what exactly I need to do to make progress.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When I made bigger goals, but I didn't really break it down into smaller subsets, it just tends to not happen because I like see the lofty goal. I don't know how I'm going to get there. It seems unachievable or intimidating. So I procrastinate because I'm like, well, I don't even know where to begin with that. And so I just put it off and put it off and put it off versus if I'm like, okay, what's a doable step that I can do within this week or this day sometimes? Like I'm trying to lose 5 more pounds. And sometimes I'm like at that plateau state where it's like super hard. And so I just want to like, when I focus on like, oh man, I'm going to try to eat super clean for the rest of this month, that seems a little overwhelming, even just for this month, let alone like 6 months. That's like too much. But if I break it down to like, okay, I'm just going to try to make it through the week or make it just through today. If I could just not eat sugar today, that's a win for me. And that makes me feel a little more motivated. If I just focus on day by day versus like the long-term thing seems a little too overwhelming and too intimidating at times.
Well, I think you touched on something important, which is, when you said like, I'm just not going to eat sugar today. When you start
Right.
having your goals subdivided down to the point where they're either like yes or no, or some sort of value, like
Right.
like a number,
Mhm.
that's when you can actually see if you're making progress or not, and sort of track it in a way that is meaningful and tangible, and then you can make adjustments. So another thing that I see and have experienced super commonly is like something like you were saying, like, I want to get fit, or I want to lose 10 pounds, or
Right.
whatever else. And then it's attacked with sort of this like haphazard plan of like, oh, I am going to do this workout program. Like, I'm not going to track it. I'll just kind of do it when I do it.
Mhm.
But it really hit home for me. My main example is like, I did that. Like, I got on this fitness program that was supposed to be 30 days. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, I'm just going to do it. I'll do, whatever the next video is every time,
Right.
and just keep making progress on it. And I got to the end of it and I was like, this is awesome. Like, I finished it. Like, this is great. But then I started just like thinking about it a little bit more and going backwards and being like, wait a minute, this was a 30-day program. I
Mhm.
had to have started it at least 45 days ago, which means I was skipping at least like every third day, which means I really didn't do the program at all. Like, I wasn't even close to it. And I didn't take any sort of like baseline measurements or
Oh,
like ending measurements.
right.
So I didn't really know like what progress I had made, besides sort of just like, oh, I think I did really good.
Mhm.
And it's possible that I didn't make any progress at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the point where it like really hit home for me, where it was like, if I approach my goals in a way that I'm not tracking, I'm not paying attention, I don't have
Mhm.
clear metrics,
Right.
it's actually really hard to know how much progress I've made towards this thing. And if I'm not getting results, because there's been in the past where I'm, doing this program or whatever I'm doing, but I'm not really doing it, and I'm
Right.
not getting results,
Mhm.
if I don't know what I've been doing or what I like the outcomes, I also can't adjust, right? It's like, oh, well, I don't know if this is working at all because I'm not really doing it.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. I think having metrics can really make the difference because then you know if you're making progress or not versus kind of like feeling like you have, and in reality that might not be the case. Like for what I realize, especially when it comes to like weight loss, I mean there is a metric, but sometimes I don't like to get so caught up in the numbers, and I don't want my patients to get caught up in the numbers because it's not always so linear. Like I can eat the same exact foods one day and lose a pound, and then I can eat the same exact food the next day and gain a pound. So it's just like it's not always science, but what I've been focusing on, because I know where my weaknesses are on the weekends. It's like every weekend I like gain 3 pounds and then I take the rest of the week to lose it. And so it's not really making any progress. I'm very stagnant. So I didn't cheat one weekend and I actually progressed past my like plateau place. And I was like, yes. But this past weekend, because family was visiting, I did not. So I was just like, if I could just make it like 2 weekends in a row without cheating, that is like a huge deal to me. Honestly, one weekend without cheating is like a big deal, but like two would be like, wow. Yeah.
You mentioned something else that's really important. You're talking about how like, you don't necessarily want to focus on weight completely, and you don't
Right.
recommend that to other people. And I think
Yeah.
that boils down to like the larger idea of when you are working on your goals and stuff, you should work on or focus on the things that are completely in your control.
Right.
Now, your weight is a good example because it can
Yeah.
fluctuate to some
Yeah.
degree, like week by
Right.
week. You have influence over it, but like day by day, it can fluctuate based on just
Right.
other things. But
Mhm.
the things you can control are like you were saying, like, did I have things that are cheat meals, or like if you're tracking calories, like
Right.
how many calories did I eat, or
Mhm.
did I hit my macros, or however you're organizing
Right.
your
Yeah.
fitness and weight loss goals.
Mhm.
But by focusing on those things, it also helps with like feeling motivated, I guess.
Yeah.
Because this applies to other things outside of weight loss. But when you have a metric that you don't directly control,
Mhm.
then you can get really discouraged. Now, those metrics can be super useful for are the things that are in your control the correct things to get the outcomes you want. So, for example, if you were, I don't know, restricting your calories by 500 per day,
Mhm.
and then you get to the end of 3 months and your weight hasn't changed at all, like that is a clear indicator that the method you've chosen is not producing the results you want.
Mhm.
But still, the best place to put your focus is on those things that you actually control.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just like there's so many variables when it comes to weight loss. Like the things that I can control and I'm tracking it, like I don't like tracking my foods, but I know that's the only way to like actually make genuine progress is like, yeah, okay, what is my calorie count on average every day to lose weight? But sometimes I can have the same amount of calories and it doesn't make a difference. So I noticed like if I eat more protein, that tends to help weight loss versus when it's even healthy carbs, it doesn't always like lose it. So it's just kind of like finding the right balance of carbs, fats, proteins to identify. And that's kind of trial and error to some degree, but you have to take those like metrics versus like, am I doing like 50% protein a day or am I doing like 33%? Is it like 22%? Like what is the percentage? And so let me try to roughly shoot for that once I kind of establish what's actually like moving the scale.
Yeah, and I think it's fairly common for people to believe that they have accurate guesses for these kinds of things or just like stuff in general, right?
Yeah.
Like people rely very heavily on memory
Mm-hmm.
to be like, or feelings to be like, oh no, like
Yeah.
I mostly ate enough protein.
Right.
But a lot of the times when you actually sit down and
Mm-hmm.
track things or measure them or whatever, is
Right.
relevant to the goal,
Mm-hmm.
you will find that the results do not map well to the like feelings or memory. Like memory is not very, I mean, it's powerful, but it's not very accurate, right? Like memory is not,
Right.
the point of it is not to remember every single detail. So that's not the way that it's structured.
Right.
And that's why most people can't remember like, everything at a super high level of detail.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so important to, even though it is like you're saying, sort of a pain, like, oh, I have to track my food. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. It's not fun necessarily,
But
but it's the only way that you can
right.
get accurate information. It doesn't mean that you have to do it forever, but just
Yeah.
if like you're starting or you're not seeing the results you want
Mm-hmm.
or whatever else, there's like a lot of instances of people not meeting their goals in some way. And if you don't know what it is exactly that you've done or not done,
Right.
then it is very difficult to know what adjustments to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like my husband will kind of just be like, I felt like I did pretty good today. He doesn't really need to lose weight, so he's less motivated. Um, which also plays a factor, I think, when you're goal setting, like look at like how motivated are you to like achieve this goal and why is it important to you? Because if it's not, you're less likely to take the actions to actually fulfill on that goal. So it's just like think about why is this important to you is also important when you're setting goals.
Yeah, that is one that's critical because it's another thing that I've seen very commonly in people is them setting goals about things that they don't really care about or they don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
drive or fire or
Mm-hmm.
enough just motivation or I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure what word to pin on it, but basically it's like sort of this idea of like, oh, I want to lose weight, right? This is just a
Right.
common example. I've seen this a lot of
Yeah.
times. I want to lose weight. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, what are you doing to change your diet or to change your fitness or to change
Yeah.
just anything? And a lot
Right.
of times, like, oh, no, no, no. I just like, I want to lose weight. And it's like, well, you must not want to do it that bad. Like at a certain point, you
Not
have
really
to be
doing
willing
anything different.
to put
Right.
the effort into to achieve the goal. And I feel
Right.
like, there's a difference between goals that people say that are like, idealistic and ones that people say that they're actually committed to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good distinction because I've made like for my income, I've made really lofty goals. It's like, yeah, I want to make like seven figures or something like crazy. But when I like break it down, and I think about it and I'm like, I really don't want to put in the work that it would take to make 7 figures. So I'd rather enjoy my life more, and that's more important and valuable to me. So it's kind of like this pie in the sky idea that I'm not really taking that seriously. I mean, it'd be nice, but it's like I'm living a pretty comfortable life, not making 7 figures. So it's just kind of yeah, there's that lofty like pie in the sky type of goal, and but then there's like goals of like, okay, there is an actual set income that I do want to make to live comfortably, provide for family, and be able to have some travel once in a while. So that's more attainable based on like realistic expectations and goals.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting distinction, or sort of the way that you just described it, because I feel like it's very, very common. Like, and I don't think it's as common for people to recognize that for those lofty goals,
Mm-hmm.
there are a set of actions that you will have to take to reach it. And a lot of people, once they connect the two, right? It's like some like magical thinking of like,
Right.
oh, I want to make a 7-figure income. I guess I'll just keep doing what I've been doing, like, and then I'll just get it. Like that doesn't happen.
No.
Yeah, and I feel like that's really common. So I think
Right.
it's a really good point of like, for some of these other goals, thinking about once you start getting a little bit more concrete or into the
Mhm.
structure or the steps that you need to actually make it there, you may realize that you don't actually want that thing, because part of setting goals and is recognizing the work you have to do to actually achieve it.
Right. Yeah.
But I think people get caught up in the trap all the time of, just like you said, like, I want to make 7 figures, 5, 10, 15 years pass. They're
Mhm.
like, why didn't I reach this goal?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it actually just made me think of this funny video I saw of Rob McElhenney, who is the guy who plays Mac on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He did this like short video for, I guess, Men's Health, and like someone from the internet was asking, is like, how did he get so ripped and he gives like, did I already tell the story? I don't even I might have.
I've seen the video, but keep going.
Okay. But yeah, like basically he's like, oh, if you want to achieve this type of body, it's super easy. Anyone can do it. You just have to like give up your 9 to 5 job, forget about your family, hire a personal chef, get like the personal trainer who trained Magic Mike, and you got to get a studio to pay for it. Just like forget food, forget alcohol, like, yeah. And so he's like jokingly showing that it's very unrealistic for the average person. And it's like, you have to go to extreme measures to achieve. You have to make it practically like a full-time job, focusing on your body. And usually like someone's not going to pay you to do that. So there's less motivation for you to do that. And it's like, do you really need that like super ripped 6-pack, like bodybuilder type of body? It's like, okay, but at what cost? At what cost? Like family, fun, all sorts of things.
Yeah, I think that's so important to remember, especially as people look around at other people, because the percent of people who genuinely got lucked into some high level of success or measure of success, like being super fit or wealthy or whatever else, the number of people who lucked into that are extremely low.
Yeah.
The vast majority, almost everyone, put in a ton of time. It's interesting when I see, like, for example, I know a couple people who have made quite a bit of money and like have some businesses and stuff, and they don't really do a ton of work now. And it's interesting just hearing how certain people talk to them, saying things like, oh, I wish I was lucky like you, and not knowing that, at least the people that I know spent 10, 15, 20, 25 years working nonstop.
Right.
Nonstop, like nights, weekends. Whereas, these people are like, oh, I wish I could get lucky like you, are not spending. I mean, they're spending the nights, and this is totally fine, but like they're spending their nights, just like hanging out, watching TV, playing video games, spending their weekends like out doing, similar types of activities. And that is 100% okay and fine and great. Like nothing wrong with that. It's just when you don't recognize what the outcomes you're going to get based on what you're doing actually are. For a lot of people, they see like, oh, this person's rich and successful. Like I want that. But like you were saying with the 7-figure income, like, no, they don't want to do the work in between where they're at and that outcome, because that just wouldn't be a good life for them. That's totally fine. It's just that you have to recognize that, so you're not stuck with these sort of like lingering negative thoughts or negative mindsets around like, oh, I wish I was just like lucky like these other people.
Yeah. Luck usually doesn't help so much, or to achieve what certain people achieve. Like for any sport or instrument, there's people that are a little like naturally gifted with it, but they don't become like pro level without a ridiculous amount of training, even if they have a natural talent. Like pro level athlete, artists, whatever, most of the time they had to like hustle their ass off. I mean, unless they had like really great connections, but even still, it's like you can have, like, sometimes you need both. It's like you got to hustle your ass and you got to have like good connections. It doesn't usually happen without the hard work you put into it.
Yeah, I mean, even speaking from personal experience, like, when I switched into software and started getting like much higher paying jobs, it was interesting to just see people around me be like, oh wow, you got so lucky getting this fancy job, or like you got so lucky doing this. And it's like, you haven't seen me for the last 2 years because I've been heads down learning how to program all day every day. That's the only thing I've been doing. And that's just like a small example, but yeah, like anything that has a high level of skill or success or whatever else just takes a lot of effort. And the more clearly you can sort of like see that and understand that, the easier it is to make decisions that align with what you actually want, I think is like the important piece for me, is because I see certain paths now that before I was just like, oh, I wish this would just happen to me. And now I see like, listen, I don't want to spend an extra, 20 hours a week trying to play soccer so I can get better at soccer. Like, I don't care.
I don't need to
it's
be
not
that
worth it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel with a lot of things. It's like usually that comes at a cost, not necessarily financially, but time wise. And that's something I find very valuable. And I have to like be really reflective of what's important to me and where do I want to spend my time and why is this goal important. I was curious though, like, what are your thoughts on people, between the like, okay, let's scale down the lofty, unrealistic goals to more feasible goals. But what if you still don't want to do the work? Or how do you get motivated to do that? I guess, even if it's feasible and reasonable.
Yeah. So first, before I go any further, I want to say like, keep those lofty goals. Keep those. Those. Yeah. I just want to make it clear that like we should keep those too, because those are useful and they allow us to like guide all these other things, and sometimes are more realistic than they seem at the outset. Because I've had a couple goals that like, when they were 2 years away, I was like, there's no way. And then a year or two later, I was like, whoa, really? I'm here? Okay. Anyway, side tangent. There's a couple things. So one, we already talked about, but the most important thing is that you have a strong reason to do it.
Right.
So for example, I feel like a lot of people want to lose weight for just like aesthetic reasons, and they're not that strong of reasons. But there are other people who want to lose weight or get more fit for like medical reasons, and those tend to stick a lot, or like health reasons, right? And those tend to stick more. So if you can find something to anchor into, as long as it's something that is intrinsically sort of driving you, and for some people that is aesthetics stuff, but as long as you can anchor into something that is emotionally compelling to you, right? That's a starting point. And if you like can explicitly write that down or just find a way to make that more top of mind,
Right.
Sometimes that can help when it's like, I don't really want to do this. Okay, but I have this other reason to do it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Other things that you can do are if you can sort of chain it into something you're going to do anyway, right? So if like we'll do exercise, right? We'll
Yeah.
use that example. If you can do something like, okay, when I get off work, I'm going to do 10 push-ups, right? Like you're going to get off work every day or, 5 days a week or whatever. If you can sort of chain the two into some sort of a pattern, that's useful for a lot of people. Again, it doesn't necessarily like, oh, wow, I'm so motivated now, but you can get into sort of a routine where it's just like part of the day. And it's less about, am I motivated right now? And more about, oh, I'm just going to do this because it's part of the routine.
Right.
Other things that you can do, one that's I've had a lot of success with is finding sort of a very, very small piece of the larger thing I want to do and knocking that out.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I had a period of time where I wanted to write a page every day for my book.
Yeah.
I didn't get too far with that. So I kept that goal, but I switched to like, okay, every day I will for sure write a sentence. And like writing one sentence does not feel that overwhelming at all, right? So it's just like
Right.
one small piece of momentum. And it didn't work every time, but I would say 80-90% of the time I'd write the one sentence and then be like, okay, well, I'm already here, and continue until I actually hit my real goal. So that helped a lot, especially on days I wasn't motivated, because it's hard when you have a piece so small to say like, oh, I can't write a sentence in it. Like the excuse sounds so bad. It sounds so lazy and ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that helped me a lot. I'd be curious what has worked for you to like keep consistency up. I probably have some more, but I don't want to ramble too much.
Yeah, no, those are some great things. I think sometimes it's like having a lower like buy-in can kind of get you some motivation to achieve it. The other thing that I noticed that really makes a difference for me, like for example, when I was trying to create my online course and I like procrastinated for so long and put it off, it wasn't like I needed accountability to actually like do it. And so I had an accountability coach to really make the difference and hold me, like actually check in with me every week to be like, how much did you do? What did you do? And if I know I'm going to have to report to someone, that's more motivating because you don't want to be that person that like says, oh, I didn't do anything like every single week. Like, okay, 1 week, whatever, 2 weeks. Okay. But like after three times or more, like I really got to get on this. So that makes a difference. And sometimes it is like starting small. It's like, okay, well, I'm only going to record like for a couple minutes, or I'm going to just do a couple slides or whatever it might be. And that makes it less intimidating and achievable. And it kind of gets the juices flowing. And I know we've talked about this idea, like with meditation, like if you really struggle with regular meditation, maybe just investing in 1 minute. It's like, you can't just be like, I don't have time for it. Like everyone can find time for 1 minute of meditation. So it's just getting the ball rolling is the hardest part. But once you're there, it's not as bad typically.
Yeah, you mentioned something that sparked my brain, which is, you mentioned the external accountability, which works for a lot of people. Another potential thing, depending on who you are, is internal accountability in terms of some sort of like a spreadsheet or some way that you're tracking it for yourself so that you just have all the information for yourself. That works for some people. In a related piece, I talked about like you can chain different activities together. You can also block out your calendar. We've talked about that in like time management, but sometimes just having a protected, or I guess at least dedicated period of time where you're going to do this thing can help a lot too, where it's like, okay, from 7 to 8, I'm working on my book. That's what I'm doing every day.
Right.
That can really help too, because when you have, sort of like, oh, I want to work on my book, and you don't have time for it, you just kind of like, no. Oh, it's midnight already. Oh, I guess I'll start tomorrow.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference if you put it in your calendar. And if you're putting it in your calendar every week and then you're still not doing it, that's where you got to get some extra accountability to be like, are you, maybe it doesn't even, you don't even necessarily have to hire someone. You could have like a friend just say, hey, can you text me and ask me if I did this by the end of the day? And sometimes that might be sufficient. And if that's not, then maybe you do have to hire someone. So there's ways.
Yeah, and I've found that depending on the task or where I'm at, or just depending on all kinds of factors, it's some combination of all of these things
Right.
that gets me to execute things effectively, right? It's like, okay, I need to have a good reason. It needs to be my calendar. I need to have a tracker to
Yes.
like see how consistently I'm doing it. I need to sit down and like meet with somebody so that I know that I have this other accountability. You know, it's like mixing and matching between all of those things is what has worked most consistently for me. And one thing I want to highlight is it is not always about feeling motivated. In fact, it's often not about feeling motivated. It's often about being disciplined or having structure or just doing it anyway. I think I'm sure we've talked about this before, but if you only go off of how you feel and you have goals that are hard, it is very unlikely that you will hit them just by going like, oh, I feel like working on this so much today. And if you do have that, you are super blessed, because that's not the way it works for most people.
If I had that. No. Yeah, that would be quite the blessing, absolutely. But that's, I don't think, is realistic for most people, unless it's something like you are so crazy excited about. But for the most part, if it's like weight or income, it's like, yeah, you need that deeper why, you need the structure, you need the accountability, you need like something to like baby steps, basically, if that's what it takes to get you started. Yeah.
And in my experience, and I believe this is what's most common, is motivation comes in sort of waves, right? Like it ebbs and flows.
Totally.
And so I think some percentage of people think like, oh, I don't feel like doing this, so I'm just not going to do it. For some projects, that's totally awesome. Like if it's some random side project you only want to work on when you want to work on, totally fine.
Yeah.
But if you have like, timelines or deadlines, or you just want to get something done, or it's impacting your life significantly, like you have to move past sort of this, like, I only do what I feel like doing.
Right. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, I think we covered this topic pretty well. Was there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I think I rambled quite a bit today, so I'm feeling good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and help us spread happiness in the world. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.